October 14, 1941, the Mediterranean, somewhere south of Sicily. A German cargo ship called the Casaregis ploughs, through dark water at 11 knots, carrying 800 tons of aviation fuel, ammunition crates stacked to the gunwales, and replacement engines bound for Rommel's tanks baking in the Libyan desert. Her captain has no reason to worry. The escort is adequate. The route was chosen at the last possible moment, communicated by radio only hours before departure, encrypted in a cipher the Kriegsmarine considers unbreakable. And yet, 300 kilometers away, a Royal Navy submarine commander is already plotting an intercept course, working from a position fix so precise it reads almost like cheating. Within hours, the Casaregis is burning. Within a day, she is gone, along with everything she carried. To the Italian and German high commands, this looked like extraordinary bad luck. It happened again the following week, and the week after that. Convoy after convoy, often sailing under total radio silence after departure, somehow found themselves shadowed, intercepted, and destroyed by British submarines and aircraft that always seemed to know exactly where to be. Entire shipments of fuel, tanks, and men vanished into the Mediterranean without explanation, and the men responsible for explaining it grew increasingly desperate and increasingly wrong. This is the story of how Britain learned to read its enemy's mail before it was even sent, and how it built an elaborate, sustained deception simply to hide the fact that it could. By the autumn of 1941, the war in North Africa had become a war of logistics as much as tactics. Erwin Rommel's Africa Corps was a formidable fighting force, but it was tethered to a single, fragile lifeline. Every tank, every liter of petrol, every replacement soldier had to cross the Mediterranean from Italy to the ports of Tripoli and Benghazi, a sea route patrolled by the Royal Navy and the RAF from bases in Malta, Gibraltar, and Egypt. Rommel understood this vulnerability better than anyone. He repeatedly warned Berlin and Rome that his offensive could not be sustained without secure supply, and for a time, the figures bore this out starkly. Some convoys were losing over 30% of their cargo to Allied attack. By certain months in 1941 and again in 1942, losses on particular routes climbed even higher, with some estimates suggesting more than half of all material dispatched to North Africa during the worst periods never arrived. The trouble for the Axis was not a lack of effort. Italian naval planners varied routes, sailed convoys at night, used multiple escort patterns, and tried to maintain strict radio discipline. German liaison officers pressed for greater secrecy still. On paper, the system should have worked. A convoy that told no one its course in advance, that communicated only in code, and that sailed through a vast and largely empty sea ought to have had reasonable odds of slipping through undetected. Submarines could not see over the horizon. Aircraft could not search the entire Mediterranean at once. Pure chance should have favored the convoys far more often than it did. Instead, the opposite happened, with a consistency that should have set off alarm bells far sooner than it did. British submarines from the famous 10th Flotilla based in Malta, alongside Swordfish torpedo bombers and Wellington bombers flying from Maltese airfields, kept finding their targets with uncanny precision. Ships were intercepted not through luck, broad patrol patterns, or aerial reconnaissance alone, but with foreknowledge of departure times, routes, and cargo manifests that no ordinary intelligence-gathering method of the period could plausibly explain. For the Axis commanders trying to diagnose the problem, every conventional explanation fell short. They suspected spies in Italian ports. They suspected traitors among dock workers. They reorganized their own communications procedures repeatedly. None of it solved the mystery, because none of it addressed the real cause, and the real cause was something far more extraordinary than a leak at the docks. The answer lay roughly 2,000 kilometers away, in a collection of unglamorous huts on a country estate in Buckinghamshire. Bletchley Park, home to the Government Code and Cipher School, had by 1941 made significant inroads against the German Enigma cipher machine. the device used by the Wehrmacht, Kriegsmarine, and Luftwaffe to encrypt their communications. Enigma worked by passing an electrical signal through a series of rotating wheels and a plug board, scrambling each letter of a message according to a daily changing configuration that produced an almost incomprehensibly vast number of possible settings. The machine itself was the size of a portable typewriter, weighing around 12 kilograms, simple enough for a trained operator to use in minutes, yet its output had defeated cryptanalysts for years. What changed the equation was a combination of captured material, mathematical insight, and a remarkable electromechanical device built specifically to attack the problem. Alan Turing and his colleagues at Bletchley designed the bomb, a machine roughly the size of a large wardrobe, built from rows of rotating drums that mimic the wiring of multiple Enigma machines simultaneously. Rather than testing each possible setting one at a time, a process that would have taken centuries by hand, the bomb could mechanically race through thousands of combinations, searching for the logical contradictions that ruled out incorrect settings and narrowed the field towards the correct one. Once a day's settings were recovered, every message sent on that network using that cipher could, in principle, be read. This intelligence, codenamed Ultra, was treated with a level of secrecy that exceeded almost anything else in the British war effort. Crucially for the Mediterranean campaign, the German Luftwaffe's Enigma traffic and increasingly other military networks gave British intelligence advance notice of convoy departures, routes, and timings, sometimes the orders themselves rather than mere hints. A signal dispatched from a Sicilian port to a convoy commander might be decrypted in Buckinghamshire and relayed onward to Malta within hours, occasionally before the convoy itself had even cleared harbor. Submarines and aircraft could then be positioned not on guesswork, but on something close to certainty. The challenge this created was not technical, but psychological and operational. Ultra was so valuable that exposing its existence, even through circumstantial evidence, risked the Germans changing their cipher procedures and shutting the entire source down overnight. British commanders therefore faced an agonizing restriction. They often could not act on ultra-intelligence directly, because doing so too precisely, too often, would betray that the intelligence existed at all. The solution was a sustained and carefully managed deception, almost a production in its own right, designed to give the Axis a plausible alternative explanation for every successful interception. This is where the operation acquired its quieter, less celebrated genius. Before any submarine or aircraft was sent to intercept a convoy located through decrypted signals, a reconnaissance aircraft would often be dispatched to fly, conspicuously and at high altitude, over or near the convoy's actual position, sometimes circling within sight of the ships before turning away. This was theater, performed for an audience of German radio operators and radar plotters, intended to be reported up the chain so that when the convoy was attacked shortly afterwards, Italian and German staff would conclude, reasonably enough, that ordinary aerial reconnaissance had spotted them. In other cases, dummy radio traffic was generated, suggesting that agents on the ground in Italian ports had observed and reported sailings, lending weight to the persistent and convenient suspicion of spies and informers among dock workers. Where possible, attacks were delayed or adjusted in timing so they did not align too neatly with the moment a coded order had actually been transmitted, blurring the link between signal and strike. If you are finding this interesting, a quick subscribe helps more than you know. The deception extended to the very organization of British intelligence reporting. A special unit functioned almost as an internal filter, taking ultra-derived information and repackaging it as though it had come from conventional reconnaissance, agent networks, or direction finding on radio transmissions before it was passed to operational commanders in Malta and elsewhere. Many of the submarine captains and squadron leaders who carried out these devastatingly effective attacks were not told the true source of their orders at all. They believed, often for the rest of their lives, that they were simply skilled hunters making the most of good reconnaissance and a measure of fortune. The comparison with German efforts to manage their own communication security is instructive, because Germany possessed nothing remotely equivalent on the Allied side. German cryptanalysts made some progress against lower-grade British and American naval codes during the war, and certainly contributed to losses in the Battle of the Atlantic during periods when Allied ciphers were compromised. But no German code-breaking effort came close to achieving the scale, depth, and sustained access that Bletchley Park maintained against Enigma traffic across multiple branches of the German armed forces simultaneously. Equally, no German deception program matched the layered sophistication of disguising Ultra's fingerprints, because Germany never had a secret of comparable value to protect in the first place. The Americans, once brought into the Ultra secret following their entry into the war, adopted similar protective protocols, restricting which commanders could see decrypted material and insisting on cover stories before acting upon it, recognizing that Britain's caution had already proven its worth. The material impact on the North African campaign was profound, though historians continue to debate exactly how decisive it was relative to other factors such as Allied air superiority, the stretching of German supply lines, and simple geography. What is not disputed is that during the periods when ultra-intelligence flowed most freely and convoy interception rates were highest, Rommel's forces suffered chronic shortages of fuel and equipment at precisely the moments they could least afford them, including in the run-up to the pivotal battles around El Alamein in 1942. Some historians have argued that the convoy interdiction campaign, more than any single land battle, throttled the Afrika Korps into a position from which it could not recover. Others caution that attributing this entirely to Ultra overstates the case, given that conventional reconnaissance and the sheer concentration of British naval and air power around Malta also played a substantial role. What can be said with confidence is that the psychological effect on Axis commanders was severe and well documented. Rommel himself complained bitterly and repeatedly to his superiors about the seemingly inexplicable losses, and Italian naval officers grew increasingly paranoid about security leaks that, in the conventional sense, did not actually exist. The secret held remarkably well throughout the war, a testament to the discipline of everyone involved, from the codebreakers themselves down to the pilots flying decoy reconnaissance sorties who never fully understood why their flights mattered so much. It was not until decades after the war, beginning with revelations in the 1970s, that the broader public learned of Ultra's existence and its role in shaping campaigns once attributed purely to operational skill and good fortune. The bomber machines themselves were largely dismantled after the war under strict secrecy orders, though a working reconstruction can today be seen at Bletchley Park, now preserved as a museum, alongside surviving examples of the Enigma machine itself. The legacy of this episode extends well beyond North Africa. It established, for the first time at this scale, the principle that signals intelligence is only as valuable as the discipline used to protect it, a lesson that shaped Allied intelligence practice for the remainder of the war and arguably for the decades of intelligence work that followed. The careful choreography of decoy reconnaissance flights and manufactured cover stories became something of a template, refined and reused whenever sensitive intelligence needed to be acted upon without revealing its source. Return for a moment to that burning ship south of Sicily in October 1941. The Casaregis was not unlucky. She was not betrayed by a careless dock worker or spotted by an unusually sharp-eyed pilot on a routine patrol. She was found because somewhere in rural Buckinghamshire, a machine built from drums and wires had already unpicked the cipher that was supposed to keep her safe, and because a chain of people stretching from codebreakers to submarine captains had constructed an entire false narrative simply so that the truth could never be told. Convoy after convoy followed her into the depths, their cargoes of fuel and steel and ammunition disappearing as though the sea itself had simply decided not to let them through. It was not the sea. It was never the sea. It was a quiet country house, a handful of brilliant and largely anonymous codebreakers, and a deliberate, sustained act of theater performed for an audience that never knew it was watching a play. Germany built better tanks. Germany built more powerful guns. But Germany never solved the one problem that mattered most in the Mediterranean. It never realized it was already being read like an open book, page by page, convoy by convoy, until the ships simply stopped arriving, and Rommel's war machine ran dry in the desert sand.